Last week I was on the road all week. I met with a bunch of different facilities that are under new development. And I kind of laid out, like, they had their equipment list of like 1,000 items. I'm like, yeah, we distribute for a lot of these companies you have on here. And so a lot of people just like don't quite understand what that means. And kind of the analogy that I'll use is like, if you can go to Walmart and do your entire shopping trip in one visit, why wouldn't you?
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On this episode of First Case, we're going to be speaking with Jonathan Murphy, Regional Account Executive with Diligent Surgical Power. We're wrapping up pretty close, just a couple episodes to go, Melanie. This whole season dedicated to capital equipment, and there's been a shift in the industry towards more and more distributors. And so we're going to be talking about the role of a distributor, the benefits of a distributor, and we're also going to be diving into the difference between refurbished and new equipment, which plays very much into Jonathan's expertise as we have this discussion today.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the hospital space with service line coordinators, team leaders, OR leaders, whatever, who they can get equipment from. Who do they need to buy it from? How do they need to get it into their OR? Is the distributor the way to go? What are they doing? How do I work with them? So just a lot of different questions, or maybe uncertainty, or maybe even a lack of familiarity with that role when you need to get equipment. And I think that John's really going to just help us understand what they do and kind of see a different side of how we can get equipment.
All right. Well, Jonathan Murphy up next. Stay with us.
I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A 17 Studios production, you're listening to First Case.
We're talking with Jonathan Murphy, Regional Account Executive with Diligent Surgical Power. And John, we've had this whole season committed to capital equipment. And today we're going to be talking about your area of expertise, which is a capital equipment distributor. And we're also not just going to be talking about new equipment, because that's one of the assumptions that gets made, is that capital equipment and that budget is always new, but it can also be refurbished equipment. So that's going to play into our discussion as well. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on.
So, John, why don't you just talk a little bit about your background and experience with capital equipment and selling into healthcare, and anything else. If you want to add something interesting about what you love to do in your spare time, we'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, if you know anything about medical or orthopedics, I'm from Warsaw, Indiana, which is the orthopedic capital. So you have Zimmer there, Biomet was there before the merger, J&J there, DePuy, they have an office there, Medtronic's there. There's just a ton of companies in that area. So I kind of had it interesting, growing up. It seemed like everyone worked in medical. If you weren't working in medical, you were just, you're working in something, just in the town because it was there. So it seemed like everyone worked in that. And, for the longest time, I thought medical equipment was just like implants and everything because, everyone that you like knew or talked to, they're like, what do you do? And they're like, I sell knees, stuff like that. So it wasn't even until I started working for Didig that like I understood what capital equipment was. I started working there and they were kind of explaining everything to me. And I was like, I guess that makes sense. You have to like buy the stuff in order to, do the surgeries. So, that's pretty much, growing up in that area, I knew that medical is a good field. So definitely something being around there you want to get into.
So I got to imagine too, since we're just talking about the area that you grew up in with so many of those orthopedic reps and the hips and knees. What's the sports environment like?
Oh my goodness. Sports environment there is absurd. Like, it's crazy. I mean, it's good, but Warsaw, they've had some incredible basketball teams over the years. You know, a couple guys go to the NBA, and, you know, our town, it's crazy when I say I'm from there and, you know, you say orthopedic capital, it's only like 15,000 people. So it's like a small town that just has tons of industry. And, you know, we pull from all the farm communities around the town to have really good athletes. So sports is definitely
I'm curious, who made it to the NBA? I got my start in podcasting covering the NBA back in the 2000s.
Yeah,
2000s,
definitely. So
I totally got to know.
Yeah, Rick Fox that was on the Lakers. He's from Warsaw.
He was on the Celtics long before he was on the Lakers.
You'll have to forgive me on that one.
I do know Rick Fox.
I don't know if I was alive yet, but yeah.
I'm a diehard Celtics fan. That's part 2 of that. And you just went after the Celtics Lakers rivalry with one player name. Beautifully done.
Very good.
All right, John. Well, now I've got you red-faced.
Well, hey, good thing this is just audio. You know, people my age, I'll tell them, I'll be like, oh, Rick Fox, like the NBA player. And they're like, I don't know who that is. I'm like, the baseball player from Holes. And like people know from the movie that he acted in, like, instead of like the basketball player. So it's funny. And then, and then we had the Plumlee brothers that all went and played at Duke. They all were from Warsaw.
Yeah. Mason Plumlee.
Yep.
And yeah.
They were all from Warsaw, so they were there until I think they were like sophomores or something, and they went down to like a private school and then went to Duke. So definitely a lot of athletics going on there. People are like, your football stadium's bigger than like, you know, most schools. You know, our basketball, our gym is massive. They built like a field house and stuff. So I think in total the high school has like 20 basketball courts, which is just crazy. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. So definitely, people love their athletics in the orthopedic capital.
Well, you said you kind of made your way to Dittich, and that's when you really learned about capital equipment, and it wasn't just hips and knees. But I also wanted to ask you, like, as you started figuring out what a distributor was, like, did that also was that something that was also foreign to you as you were hearing these stories of everybody who was working in medical?
No, it's, you know, I actually wasn't quite familiar with like the distribution aspect. And honestly, that's not something that we really did when I first got to the company. That's something I tell people about. One of my colleagues, David Johnson, I don't know if he planned it or if he did it on accident. When people would reach out to us and ask for certain brands of equipment, he would just go to that company and be like, hey, I have someone that wants this item. I know that you sell through distributors. Can we distribute for you so that I can provide this to this facility I'm working with? And slowly over time, he just like kept signing more and more people up doing that we got to the point where we're at now where, you know, most of the stuff I'm selling is through distribution. So it was kind of just like, you know, it seems like a lot of things in business, it was kind of an accident, you know, I don't think he even planned on it. I've asked him before, I'm like, did you do this on purpose? He's like, no. He's like, I had no clue what I was doing. So, and we're still doing it. You know, people will reach out and ask me about things if we have them. And I'm like, you know, we don't right now, but let me call that company and see if we can. You know, so it was kind of a foreign thing to me as well. And I think distributors is foreign to a lot of facilities and equipment planning groups as well.
Okay, so that kind of teased me up to the very next question, and you really already kind of hinted at it. But what are the benefits of a distributor? I mean, in my brain, I don't know that I remember working with a distributor necessarily when we were ordering different equipment, although I kind of think we might have. But usually you think you got to go to the big company. You've got to go to them to get what you need. But really a distributor, it seems like they can really kind of be that middleman and help. Is that true, or is there more? What are the benefits?
Yeah, definitely. You know,
a distributor?
So there's a lot of benefits to it. And I think it's something that people just like don't know yet. You know, last week I was on the road all week. I met with a bunch of different facilities that are under new development. And I kind of laid out, like, they had their equipment list of like 1,000 items. I'm like, yeah, we distribute for a lot of these companies you have on here. And so a lot of people just like don't quite understand what that means. And kind of the analogy that I'll use is like, if you can go to Walmart and do your entire shopping trip in one visit, why wouldn't you? Why would you go to a bunch of different stores when it's all at Walmart? So that's kind of like what I say is I let people know, like, hey, you can get all this stuff through one person and you don't have to go running all over, calling a bunch of different reps, And, also some companies only sell through distribution. Some don't have, direct sales reps. They have reps that will support it and stuff, but they don't have ones that are actually, selling to people. They just sell through distribution. So that's definitely something that I think a lot of people don't even realize.
Has your business grown since the pandemic? Because I know a lot of these companies, the ones like Melanie we're talking about that had traditionally had direct reps, there was a big layoff because nobody knew it was going to happen in the industry. And one of the ways to kind of control costs was to let go of the sales force, especially since they weren't allowed to enter the hospitals during that stretch of time and cases were canceled. So I feel like even as those same companies are coming back from the pandemic, they're choosing to stay with the distributor model instead of start hiring reps back on. So did you see that impact your business? Did it open up opportunities for you?
Yeah, it's crazy you asked that. Our company actually doubled in size. So our revenues doubled, which is really crazy when you think about it, considering the company started in 1990. So here we are, 30 years later, and in year 30, your company doubles in size. It's pretty wild. And one of those reasons is we did see that, you have this rep that their job used to be to go into facilities and try and sell stuff. Well, now they're working from home. They can't go into the facility. So a lot of those companies, they stopped using direct reps, and then they went to distributors that were selling stuff. And then, like you said, they kind of just stayed with it, or they have a different model. Some of the companies we distribute for, they sell to hospitals and they use distributors for surgery centers and clinics. So, theoretically speaking, a hospital deal for a company is going to be a lot bigger. A hospital's a lot bigger than a surgery center. So they have their reps that are on their payroll and stuff focus on those large things, and then use distribution for the smaller projects, in their eyes, a smaller project.
If you're working with a distributor to get the equipment that you need, going back to your Walmart analogy and getting everything one-stop shopping, are you still getting the same quality of equipment that you would get if you were getting it from the company themselves?
Yeah. Most of the stuff, I was on the phone with one of the companies we distribute for earlier. She's going to do the install and in-service when it gets there. So it ships directly from their manufacturing plant. Their rep goes in, sets the stuff up, trains the staff on how to use it. I never even see it. It never comes through our doors. So we're just, I guess the word that you see it a lot all the time now is we're just drop shipping. But we have the product knowledge, we have the relationships to do so. And that is one of the hurdles with being a distributor, is people being like, when I say, oh, it's a new item, they're like, what do you mean? You just found it like in a box unopened? I'm like, no, it's shipping from the manufacturer. Like it's, non-refurbished. It's brand new from the manufacturer. So yeah, you're definitely getting that same quality.
I've definitely heard a lot of the manufacturers too talk about the counterfeit market. And so, I think that's a legitimate question that you're getting, is because sometimes they're wondering, is this goods that for whatever reason or another, the truck crashed or whatever, all kinds of different ways underneath that counterfeit model. But when you're working directly with the manufacturer, and that's really, it's more like we're an approved distributor, we're a direct distributor, we're an authorized distributor. Like these kinds of terms are really what, the customers should be looking for to sort of qualify that, correct?
Oh, definitely. Because there are, even we will get things that haven't been opened yet. We'll get random things where like some type of doctor for some specialty will ask for it. And then the surgery center or hospital will buy it, and that doctor ends up not coming. And they'll call us and be like, can you guys, give us some trade-in credit for this? And so it's technically new in a box, but we don't label that stuff as new. We're not going to say, oh, this is a new item from so-and-so. That's not something that we would do because that just doesn't look good, So yeah, we definitely let people know we're like, hey, we're an authorized dealer for this company. This stuff will come directly from the rep. So yeah, that's the way that we take approach on new equipment that we're distributing.
So what about, though, y'all can also do refurbished equipment. So how does the refurbished side of equipment distribution work?
Yeah, that's another interesting thing, because there are some companies that we distribute their equipment new, but we can also provide it refurbished. So it's kind of like you have to like make sure you let people know which one it is. But the refurbishing side is interesting because, that's how the company started, was refurbishing. So we do a ton of that. We have our manufacturing place, our warehouse, whatever you want to call it, where everything gets, taken apart and refurbished. And sometimes people are like, how do you refurbish that? Like I didn't know that someone that wasn't, a insert name brand company technician, how are you able to get parts and repair that? And I'm like, do you take your Ford to the dealership every time? No.
Good point.
You take it to a car place, so it doesn't have to be, necessary that brand or anything. So we completely, in a lot of these companies, same thing as like where Ford is going to send their car parts to a maintenance shop. These companies will do the same thing because their stuff still being out on the market is good for them. If someone has a certain brand OR table and they like it enough that they want to get it repaired or buy a refurbished one, they'd rather them do that than go buy the competitors.
What about maintenance then? If it's a refurbished piece of equipment and then it needs to be serviced afterwards, or is there any type of warranty on refurbished equipment? Is that honored by the company or is that by the distributor because they've done the refurbishing? What does that look like in the life of the refurbished equipment?
Yeah, definitely. So for us, I wouldn't necessarily say like we're a refurbished equipment distributor. We distribute new equipment. The refurbished stuff, if we said we distributed that stuff, people would lose their minds on legal teams at companies all over the country. But that stuff we do, we put a year warranty on it, which, even some companies, like their manufacturer warranty is only a year or two. So we take pride in that. Service on those, same type of thing where if you were to have bought something new from us and something happens, you reach out, you say, hey, we need a service request. Same thing with refurbished. It comes in, our service technicians take care of that. We'll fly those guys out all over to, go and repair a table or something, or a lot of stuff. If it's stuff that fits in a box, we have a full like repair service depot at our place. So even if it's not stuff that we sold, people will put it in a box and send it in for us to fix.
I've always thought refurbished was a great opportunity because if you think about it, once you buy a new piece of equipment, the first time it goes out for repair, is it any different than buying the refurbished piece? Like I look at refurbished as, what every new piece of equipment is after its first repair. And so, it really comes down to quality in terms of, how the repairs are done. Right. And so, that capabilities piece, the access to parts and everything else is really the name of the game when it comes down to refurbished and or repair.
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting here cracking up because I have this guy and he buys from me all the time, but he refuses to buy refurbished equipment. He only buys like our new stuff, but we do all of his repairs.
Right. So it's the same thing.
And
right.
So it's all the same.
I know. And I'm like, man, another thing coming in for repair. Isn't that like a brand new item that, we're repairing? He's like, yes. I'm like, I don't understand, but you do you, man. Like,
it just keeps sending me business, right?
I know. I'm just like, all right.
I think
fine.
the biggest struggle with refurbished
is
when, Melanie, you think about like turning over, to a new series of power equipment, right? And it's the amount of equipment that you need. It's the volume that usually in my mind should dictate going for new versus taking advantage of refurbished, because that's where you're going to run into some difficulty is how much refurbished equipment can you really get your hands on? And if you've got, 30 ORs and you're swapping out some equipment, that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. Would you agree with that, John?
You'd be shocked what we can get our hands on.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
It's really
crazy.
Okay.
Especially you mentioned surgical power. So, that's the second half of our name, surgical power. We have a whole, power lab that we do all the repairs. These things get completely taken apart, completely put back together. So we do so much surgical power refurbishing and repairs. Just even people that bought it from the new OEM will repair it once it's up off warranty. So it is very interesting to say that because the quantity of stuff that we have at our facility is absurd. And a lot of people, they will purchase it for R&D. So not even just like competitor manufacturers, but people that are looking at developing a new implant and they need some drills or something, they'll come to us. We have a guy, he's a serial entrepreneur in Warsaw, and he refers to our power lab as a playground. So he's just like, I come in here, I can get whatever I want. So yeah, that is not really something that we worry about in terms of like the quantity of stuff. I would say more the quantity in a time range of stuff. If someone comes and says, you mentioned 30 ORs, hey, we need 30 sets of power. I'll be like, okay, give me like 3 months. Like I can't get this to you in like a couple weeks. But if, we have it all the time where we're working on that quantity of power at multiple different facilities. And no one calling you asking for a single set of power cares that you have 29 other facilities asking for the same thing. So making sure you have that supply chain of the refurbished equipment, equipment for us to refurbish is very important.
All right, John. So as a distributor, I'm sure you run into a lot of different obstacles and different ideas on what a distributor does. What are the obstacles that you face?
I'd say the biggest obstacle is just people understanding like what a distributor is and realizing that you can, buy a lot of things from one place. There's some of our competitors out there, so I won't mention them, that people hear that name and they like automatically understand, but I don't think they really comprehend that they're a distributor. They're like, oh, this company has this equipment. So I think that's one of the biggest obstacles is getting people like to understand that. And then once you do, they realize how much easier it makes their life. And they're like, this is what I want to do. If I can just call this one guy for 90% of the things I need, I don't have to track down, 30 different reps and, talk to each of them about little details or little items that they need at their facility.
Well, that makes a huge difference for thinking OR leaders who are ordering new equipment or maybe setting up a new OR, and they've got a lot of POs, tracking numbers, and instead of chasing all of those down, they have you or a distributor who handles all of that for them, right?
Yeah, it's actually funny because I like gave I guess you could call it a pitch to this guy. They're building a new surgery center, and I was like, hey, based on your equipment list, I can provide like almost all this. And he said, no, that's okay. We're going to go direct. And it was just like the facepalm moment where I'm like, you're going to pay more because you're not getting a discount for buying 90% of your facility like we do. Someone's not going to give you a discount for buying 10 IV poles, but we'll give you one for buying 10 IV poles and everything else. And then I also told him, I was like, it's easy. All you have to do is like contact my office and they'll tell you where everything is. And he called me last week and he's like, hey, can you help me track down the items that we purchased from you? I'm having a hard time keeping track of like everything I ordered. And I was just like, man, like I would have loved to help you out. Here's the 3 things you bought.
Right.
So I think just that way, that's like a huge like benefit of working with the distributors, almost an extension of your equipment team. They can handle all those things. And, also some people like refer to us as like equipment consultants. I do some independent equipment consulting for people that they don't know. They're like, I want to build a facility and they don't know what to put in it. So they'll come to me because I know what goes in it.
Yeah, you're not really biased as a distributor. You don't have a particular company to sell from, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like you're not going to be pushing one thing over the other. If they're big thing I always point to is like stainless steel. People will be like, I want a Mayo stand. I'm like, all right, we have 5 different brands. Do you care what brand it is? And they're like, no, I want the least expensive option or the one with the quickest lead time or stuff like that. And so then I can look at those 5 different companies and be like, all right, who can get it there the fastest? Who, has the lowest price? What's the quality to price ratio? All those different types of things. So, it's not like a bias thing where someone's sitting there trying to push their brand that they own.
It's almost like you're not getting a sales pitch with the equipment. You're just getting the facts about what the equipment can offer you, right?
I've had people tell me, they're like, you are a horrible salesperson. And I'm like, buy it or don't. Like, you need it. Like, if you don't want it, like, I guess you don't have to buy it. So, no, definitely, it's not a sales pitch.
All right, Jonathan. Well, this interview has been flying by. And granted, we spent a little bit of time talking about sports at the beginning. But I wanted to ask you if you had any, like, other things that you would say or talk about the benefits of a distributor that we didn't cover during this conversation, or maybe things that people need to know, especially if they're making purchasing decisions around new equipment. Because I'm assuming you don't just work with the OR, you're working with biomed and maybe even sterile processing. You probably have lots of different contacts. But from an OR perspective, what should people know who are looking for new equipment? What should they know about a distributor that we haven't talked about?
I think what's just really important is like knowing that, I don't know about other companies, other distributors, but like my company and my team, like we're here to help. At the end of the day, what you want is you want that facility to be open and up and running and able to help people. We're not going to sit here. I had it earlier today where someone asked me for something and I said, hey, I don't actually have access to that, but I have a friend that works for that company. Like, do you want me to introduce you? So I think if you just look at some people as like an extension of your team and not necessarily just as, like I said, a salesperson, when you're a distributor, you you don't really have, if you're equipping their entire facility, you don't really care, I don't want to say you don't care, but you're not hung up on that one more item that they need. So you really just want to help them. So I think that's something that people should just keep in mind is, medical sales sometimes has a reputation, but end of the day, we're here to help you. We're here to help you and help the patients, help the facility. So I think that's something really important to keep in mind when working with someone like myself.
You're right. It can be so cutthroat in the medical device sales arena. And I've always said the best representatives, the best vendor partners, the best supplier partners are the ones that look outside of the box of what they provide and are part of the network. And so you just described that really well. Hey, I don't do that. I know who does. And I know it's kind of a little joke. Everybody's like, oh, I know a guy. But there is really a big element of that because time is of the essence. And, if you can have somebody get you in the right direction quickly as you're exploring options. And that definitely came up in the early days of the pandemic when everybody was experiencing supply chain shortages and PPE, and the nurses were in the hospital trying to deliver care and not in ideal circumstances. Having a broad network like that, having people that can get you in touch with maybe the right people is just a great way to approach business in general. And vice versa too. A lot of times if you're on the supplier or vendor side, customers, they're going to introduce you to somebody because they had a good experience with you. That's the power of that network too. And so working in that partnership and that collaboration and taking that consultative approach, I think is a really key to success. And, I can see where a distributor really gives you a pretty broad range of extension of that network. So really appreciate you coming on the show, John. Thanks for sharing your insights.
Yeah, definitely. It was a blast. Thanks for having me on.
That was Jonathan Murphy, Regional Account Executive with Dittich and Surgical Power, and we're talking about capital equipment distributors and their role in the industry, which has changed as we were talking about that, I think, earlier on in the interview, Melanie, but you're going to hear a lot more about distributors. It's what a lot of the original equipment manufacturers are moving to that model. He also qualified a little bit. They're staying with the direct reps for that acute setting, but then as you get into sub and non-acute, they're leveraging distributors and capital equipment especially to sort of, handle the logistics and the sales aspects and the support. So I did like what he said about that one piece of equipment though going out, and then they have somebody representing the company to do the training piece, which is, I think, probably what a lot of frontline nurses would be worried about is, okay, so if you're a distributor, you've got to be an expert in so many different things. Who's coming to train me to make sure that I know what I'm doing?
Yeah, no, we definitely want to know that we know how to use equipment that we get. And as leaders purchasing equipment for our operating rooms, we want to know that the person coming to do the in-services actually knows that equipment front and back. So I thought that was really good to clarify who's coming in to do the training and the in-services and all of that versus their role as a distributor. But I didn't even know everything that distributors did or how they worked hand in hand with our ORs to get capital equipment into them. So he did a really good job explaining their role.
Yeah. And not all distributors are created equal.
Right.
And some of them have different niches. And I definitely like the refurbished versus new equipment part of this conversation. It leads a little bit into my background as well in the industry when I left nursing and moved into a medical sales job. So I have a lot of experience in that arena. But that's it for this week's show. Would love to encourage everybody to follow us on social media. Go to LinkedIn. If you aren't already following First Case, go to Facebook, definitely follow the page. If there's a certain episode that you really like and there's a post out there, we also have awesome articles on the go. Melanie is constantly putting out educational articles and promoting them. Definitely comment, like, and share all of that content. If you're listening to the podcast and it's not on our smartphone app, I want to encourage you to do that. But if you are listening on Apple, Amazon, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcast application is, make sure you subscribe to us there. But on the smartphone app, we have bonus content for some of the episodes. So definitely want to encourage you to download that. We also want to hear from you. If you've got good ideas for future season themes, guests, topics, maybe there was something that you heard on one of these episodes that really made a difference in your daily practice, we want to hear about it. We'll share it on the podcast and read your quote. So we'd love to hear from you. Just send an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. On behalf of Melanie and myself, thanks for listening to this week's episode of First Case.